There is a new behavior that comes with form in version 19 of React. And the behavior is that whenever you use a form action or perhaps a server action to process your form, after the form action has finishes execution, your form data will automatically be reset. Let's test that out with my simple form here, okay? So let's say our name is test, all right? And let's say our email is test@mail.com, all right? So if we register now, as you can see now, after the form has been successfully processed, the form data was reset. This is actually a cool behavior because after the processing of your form, you don't have to make any additional efforts to reset your form. As you can see now, in my form handling, I didn't reset the form at any point, okay? After the server action was invoked, I got the result. If it is successful, I displayed a toast. And if it is not successful, I displayed another toast, okay? So this is actually a cool behavior. But the problem now comes when the form submission is not successful. Let's say our name again is, let's say our name is test2, all right? And let's say our email, I'm going to provide an invalid email now so that Zod is going to reject that. If I click on register now, you can see that the form submission was not successful. And just like React is now doing, it has automatically reset the form. This is not the kind of behavior you might want in your app because if a form submission is not successful, your user should only have to correct any of the invalid input. But now, React is automatically resetting the form, either it is successful or it is not successful. One way you can work around this is to use the useActionState API. To use the API, you can come to our form component, all right? The useAction API is going to return two values, all right? The first value is going to be a state, you can call it anything, and the second value is going to be the form action that you are going to pass to your form. I'm going to call it sign up action, all right? So here we can use the useActionState API. We have useActionState, useActionState, not userActionState. I'm going to import that from React, okay? The useActionState is accepting two arguments. It's going to be accepting the form action, and then it's going to be accepting the initial state. Our form action now is sign up. I'm going to pass sign up into it. And then I'm going to pass an initial state, okay? On page load, the initial state that you provided will be assigned to form state. But whenever you call your form action or your server action, whenever you call it using useActionState, whatever the form action is returning will now be assigned to your form state, all right, or to your state, whatever name you are using as the variable here, okay? So I'm going to create an initial state, all right? Initial state, and create the initial state here. I'm going to have const initial state, okay? So my initial state is going to be the default state that I want my form to be in, right? So my form is going to have the name input and the email input. Initially on page load, both name and email will be empty, okay? So we've passed it down here, all right? Now after passing it down here, we need to go to our form action, okay? Our form action will be accepting two parameters now. The first parameter is going to be the previous state of the form, which is our initial state. Okay, so the data type is going to be form state. I already defined the data type, okay? The form state is inside of this types.ts file. You can see our form state has just two values. Name is string and email is string, okay? So I'll be passing this as the data type of our previous state. So now to be able to keep track of the data in our state, we'll be passing the data as default value to our form. All right, so we are going to go to our form now. So whatever is in the form state, we are going to be using it as default value to our input. All right, now this is the name input. We are going to say default value, okay? And then default value is going to be form state.name. You know your form state is an object that has name and email. Initially on page load, the default value is going to be an empty string. All right, so we're going to come to the email input, and then we're also going to have default value to be form state.email. So on page loads, the default value is going to be an empty string, and whenever we process our form using the form action, whatever the form action is now returning will be passed to this form state. We will now use it to update the form state. All right, so that means we need to return some values in our form action, okay? So we are going to pass the return data type here. All right. The form action is going to be returning a promise that is going to resolve into the form state. All right. We have form state. Okay. Now in our form action, we'll be returning whatever our server action is returning. In our server action, if the form processing is successful, the server action is returning an empty field. Okay. I have a data property in my results in the result that I'm returning from my server action. Okay. So if the form processing was successful, we'll be using this empty field to update our form. And if it is not successful, we're going to be passing the data that the user passed, the data that the user submitted. We'll be returning the data back to the form. Okay, so we are now going to be using the returned data to update our form. All right. And if the inputs were invalid, we are also returning the same data that the user submitted. All right. So this return value, we'll be passing them down to the form. Okay, so we're going to go back to our form. All right. So what the server action is returning is going to be assigned to this result variable. Okay, and what we need in the result is just this data attribute, this data property. This is what we need. Okay, so we're just going to go to our form action. All right, and then we're going to come to this point and just return. What are we returning? We are returning result.data because we only need the data property to update our form. And just in case there was an error in processing the server action, so we are also going to be returning something like this this cache block. So I'm going to come here and then we're also going to return an object that contains both the name and email, right? So we're going to have our name. Our name is we are going to be getting it from the form data that was submitted. All right. So we have form data.get name. All right. And our email is also going to be form data.get email. Okay. We'll be passing the same data that the user submitted in the form. We'll be passing it back to the form. All right. So that even if there was an error, we're going to be using the same data to update the form. Okay. So that the user will not have to re-enter all the data back into the form. Now, what we need to do now is to pass this sign up action to our form. We'll not be passing the form action now directly because we've passed the form action to our use action state API. So what we now be passing down to the form is going to be this sign up action. All right. So I'm going to have the sign up action. Okay. So if there was an error in the execution of the server action, we are passing the data back to the form at this point. And if the error occurred inside of the server action, we are passing the data also back to the caller of the server action. The result we are passing down will be assigned to this results variable, okay? And then we are returning the data from the form action. The return data will be assigned to this form state, okay? And then we are using the return data as the default value. I'm going to save this now. So if we run our form now, I'm going to refresh this just to avoid any unexpected behavior. Okay, so now I'm going to pass an invalid email, and then we're going to see that. Okay, so let's say our email is test@mail. Okay, so this is also going to run into error. The email is not valid. So you can now see that the behavior is now different from what we initially had. Initially, even if there was an error, the form was reset. But now by using this method, the form is no longer reset whenever there is an error. But if there is no error, we are resetting the form data. We come here now, you can see whenever the form submission is successful, we are passing an empty string back to the caller of the server action. So let's say our name is test2 now, and let's now use a valid email. Okay, so if we register now, whenever it is successful, you can see the form has been reset. But whenever it's not successful, we are returning the same data that the user submitted. We are returning it back to the form. So this is one workaround that you can use to avoid resetting the form whenever the form submission is not successful. That will be all for this video. I will see you in the next one.